In this video, I'm going to recap some random things about Git in the manner which I use it for my project, which is underdog.zone. I'm getting this material from some older material, the June 2016 playlist. I should never manually install a newer version of Git on my Mac, because if or when the Mac does an upgrade, it will overwrite and break my usage of Git. It will negate whatever upgrade that I've made. That's just a policy I choose to follow. I have an entire playlist called Git, which describes how I run Git on my Mac workstation. Here is a look at the playlist. It's pretty extensive and it's pretty good in terms of content, but maybe not quality, because those were the early days of me making videos for YouTube. I'm in my home directory on my Mac, and I'm going to show you what my .git config file looks like. Quickly, I'll mention that this is my default Git user. I have it configured to use OSX keychain, although I don't think that works anymore. The global excludes file is here. And I have a pretty nifty alias. logg will give me a nice log history. I forgot to mention this about the git config. The UI equals true under color, that thing, it helps with getting Git to show up in colors in the terminal. There may be other settings which are necessary in order to get color, but this is one of them. You shouldn't edit your .git config directly. Instead, use the git config command to edit that file. The git config command takes one of these three options, either no option or global or system. The one you're going to want to use is global, because that's the one that causes the git config to apply to your user's .git config file, rather than the project config file or the system-wide config file. This piece of advice applies generally to whenever a book or an instructor says the word your user in a Unix environment. Most likely what that instructor is referring to, for example, if they're talking about Git, then they're talking about your Git user. They're not talking about your Unix user account. And similarly with MySQL, if they say your user account, they're talking about your MySQL user account. The first step to making a project into a Git repository is to go into the directory for the project. Okay, so you would cd into that project's folder, and then you would type git init and hit enter. Okay, here's an important tidbit which pertains to my setup. When I go to my home directory and go into VB shared, Sandbox is the folder which is shared between my Mac operating system and the Ubuntu operating system on the virtual machine. So let's go into it. These are all my projects. If I use the terminal and I cd into one of these folders and then I do git init, I am making that particular project into a Git repository, both in the directory Sandbox, which is on my Mac operating system, and in the corresponding Sandbox directory. I'm not sure if it's also named Sandbox, but it's the shared directory that's in the virtual machine. And the reason that I mention this is because this could, in theory, cause problems within the virtual machine's operating system, because there is a separate installation of the Git app inside the virtual machine. And that version of Git is not the one that created the repository. This may or may not cause a problem, but you should be aware of this. Because remember, you could act upon these projects either from the Mac operating system or from the operating system inside the virtual machine. This sometimes leads to problems. Maybe in the case of the Git repositories, it doesn't cause a problem, but for example, if you use Composer for PHP, it matters whether you use it from inside the virtual machine after you've SSH'd into it, or whether you use it from the Mac operating system. And if I want a good reference for Git commands, they're all located in vimrc. I go and click on Git, and just about everything I need to know about Git and the Git commands is here. Once the changes I make in the project need to be committed, I can do git add dot and then git commit -m with the message for the commit. Git status is also a very important Git command. Git log, and actually the way that I use it is I just put a dash and then a number. You could put the -- one line, but I haven't been using it. This gives you a list of the latest 4 commits. Something to keep in mind, when you're making a project into a Git project, in other words, a Git repository, simply going into the directory for the project and issuing the git init command is not enough. You also have to make a first commit. Otherwise, the .git directory inside your project will be empty, and it will be under most circumstances, it'll be considered as if it's not even a Git repository. Git diff is also a useful command, and it shows you the difference between the file in the working directory and the file that's already been committed. Actually, I'm not very sure about that because there's also the staging area. If you hit -Shift-Enter, the text will wrap so that it won't go off the screen. It is -Shift-S and then hit Enter. I'm not sure if you hit Enter or not. There's a nifty little trick. Usually Git diff will show you the line it removed and the line it added. If you changed a few letters in a word on a line, there's a better version of Git diff. It's this one, Git diff color words, and that'll show you all the changes on a single line rather than a minus line and a plus line. There's also a git commit command which allows you to skip the git add command. However, it does have some shortcomings which you should be aware of before using it. The command right here is the one I'm talking about, git commit -am, the A stands for add, and M stands for message, and then the message. This only works if the changes that were made were all just modifications to existing tracked files. And that's it for this video.